Special counsel Robert Mueller's investigation has ended, but its conclusions are still a mystery. Not even the White House has been briefed yet. Later today, Attorney General William Barr is expected to release his summary of the report's conclusions and will share it with key members of Congress. That summary will be released to the public, but the detailed report remains confidential at this point. What we do know is that Mueller's 22-month investigation has led to charges against 34 mostly Russian foreign nationals. 6 are former Trump aides or confidants, and so far 5 have been convicted. We begin in Los Angeles with the chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, Adam Schiff. Welcome to Face the Nation.
Good morning.
Congressman, no member of the Trump campaign was indicted for conspiring with Russia. I want to play for you what you had predicted.
I think there's plenty of evidence of collusion or conspiracy in plain sight. Now, that's a different statement than saying that there's proof beyond a reasonable doubt of a criminal conspiracy. Bob Mueller will have to determine that. On the issue of collusion, the reality is that there is ample evidence of collusion in plain sight, and it has been for a very long time.
Mueller does not think there is a criminal conspiracy on this front. Does it hurt your case?
No, as I said, I have great confidence in Bob Mueller's judgment as to who should be prosecuted or who should not. We're going to have to wait to see the report, and that report needs to be made public ASAP, so we can evaluate the body of evidence on the issue of conspiracy and look at why Bob Mueller decided not to indict. Now, vis-a-vis the president, Bob Mueller can't indict the president. So the fact there are no future indictments either on conspiracy or obstruction of justice doesn't tell us about the quantum of evidence. So I think we need to wait to see the report, but I also think the AG needs to make that report publicly available. The special counsel spent 2 years almost investigating this. The public has a right to know, indeed a need to know, so that we don't have to ask questions about what the evidence was on either of these core subjects of his investigation.
But as we heard you say there, even before the report was turned in, you did think that the president had committed a crime, and specifically that issue of conspiracy. So is there anything that the Attorney General can say that would dissuade you from that?
I never said that I thought the president had committed the crime of conspiracy. I did say that there is ample evidence, and indeed there is, of collusion of people in the Trump campaign with the Russians. And that evidence, of course, includes secret meetings at Trump Tower with Russian delegations with the promise of dirt on Hillary Clinton, the provision of polling data to someone linked to Russian intelligence by Trump's own campaign chair. I could go on and on and on. But again, the issue of indictment, of prosecution, that is Bob Mueller's decision, and I have great confidence in him. I think we all owe him a debt of gratitude for conducting this investigation in such a professional manner. And I'm going to reserve judgment on that, those prosecutorial decisions until we see the evidence, but I have great confidence in how he's conducted himself.
Will you be attending the briefing that the AG gives to those key members of Congress? Speaker Pelosi says she will boycott it.
Look, I think the Speaker is quite right. It is not going to be satisfactory for the Attorney General, the Justice Department, to brief 8 of us, the so-called Gang of 8, in a classified setting and say, okay, we've discharged our obligation, we don't have to tell the rest of the country anything. That's not going to fly. This report is going to have to be made public, and of equal importance, the underlying evidence is going to have to be shared with Congress, because that evidence not only goes to the issue of criminality, but it also goes to the issue of compromise. And remember, this began as a counterintelligence investigation into whether people surrounding the president or the president himself were compromised by a foreign power. And there's still a lot of reason to be concerned about this president's relationship with Russia and Putin. And so that evidence needs to be provided so we can make sure that we protect the country.
So you will boycott that briefing?
Look, the briefing I think we're going to get this weekend is only going to be very top-line conclusions.
The one to the Gang of 8, though, specifically.
Well, they have made no request to brief the Gang of 8 at this point.
Okay.
And there may be a point down the road where there is certain information that goes to sources or methods that are of such great sensitivity that needs to be briefed confidentially. But that is not going to be a reason to withhold evidence from the American people So we're going to make sure that that is not some ruse that the Justice Department attempts to use.
But you might attend those if they
and,
are held, though Speaker Pelosi says she won't.
I don't think the Speaker is ruling out that at some point down the line there may be very specific information that needs to be shared in a closed session, either with the Gang of Eight or with the Intelligence Committees in House and Senate. But she is determined, and we are all determined, that this report cannot be buried, that no stratagem of briefing a select number of members will avoid the need for transparency here. The public ought to see the product of this work.
You know, though, that declination decisions are typically kept confidential, and that there's a lot of information in here that will be protected. Essentially, it was gained through grand jury subpoenas. It's not things that can necessarily just be blanketed out there as a press release. So, is this a beginning of a negotiation, essentially, in terms of what you're asking to be made public?
That's a very important question, and I think what the public needs to understand is the rule against providing information as to people not indicted gives way when there is a paramount interest in transparency. And over the last 2 years, the Justice Department under Rod Rosenstein made the decision that the interest in transparency, and because Congress insisted, meant that the Justice Department should provide over 880,000 pages of discovery in an investigation in which no one was indicted. Information about Hillary Clinton and Bruce Orr and Peter Strzok and Lisa Page and others, Andy McCabe. That all was provided, notwithstanding there were no indictments in that investigation.
That wasn't a special counsel, and that wasn't a counterintelligence investigation, though. It was a different case.
Well, actually, a great many of those documents, thousands of pages of those documents, pertained to the Mueller investigation, were part of a counterintelligence investigation. There were FISA application materials that were declassified and made public. There were interviews that went into those applications and other materials that were pertaining to an ongoing investigation that had deep counterintelligence implications. So they did all of that, and they cannot maintain now that we only do that for Republican Congresses vis-a-vis Democratic candidates. We won't share information. We won't be transparent about the Trump investigation. That will never fly with Congress, and it will never fly in the court if we have to go to court to insist on that evidence.
It took Bob Mueller 2 years to come to these conclusions, and there were no indictments related yet to conspiracy with Russia. What is it that your committee can find? Because many will look at this and just say Democrats are purely focused on impeachment. Is that the end game?
That's not the end game. I think the Speaker's made very clear that in the absence of very compelling evidence, that there isn't going to be an impeachment. But one of the reasons why it's so important that this underlying evidence be shared with Congress is that so we don't have to reinvent the wheel, so that we don't have to go through all the same interviews as Bob Mueller. And indeed, there is some evidence in the possession of the Justice Department that the Congress can't get any other way. They've seized hard drives, for example, reportedly from search warrants executed on Roger Stone, other materials from search warrants on Paul Manafort. We can't get much of that information except through the department. So if there's an interest, and we certainly have one in Congress, in an expeditious investigation in Congress, that information will allow us to do that. I want to say this, too, that our obligation is not the same as Bob Mueller's, which is to decide who to prosecute. Our obligation is to find the facts, make them clear to the American people, take corrective action, protect the country, particularly if there's evidence that the president is somehow compromised by a hostile power.
We will wait and see. Congressman Schiff, thank you for joining us.